we now have a special guest. He's involved in a very important area of research and treatment. It's designed to help people who suffer from brain and spinal cord injuries. He's Dr. JCarmel. He is an MD and a PhD, and he's affiliated with Burke Rehabilitation Institute. Welcome to the program, Jason. It's nice having you on Health Talk.
Thanks so much for having me, Dr. Hoffman.
So you actually have an interesting way that you got into this area. Could you share that with our listening audience?
Sure. So in 1999, I was a medical student at Columbia, and my twin brother suffered a spinal cord injury, dove into the surf, hit his head on the sandbar, and ended up with no movement or sensation below the top of his chest, including limited hand movement.
Wow. So in an alternative universe, I mean, you're identical twins. This could be a science fiction novel, where the brother lends his identical stem cells to the twin, and the twin is, suddenly in the Paralympics, racing Usain Bolt.
Well, I'm doing what I can to help people with, in the condition like my brother.
Obviously, it's not that simplistic. So tell us a little bit about the state of the art with regard to research on restoring function after brain or spinal cord injury, because not just people coming back from the war zone with IED injuries, but also a lot of individuals like your brother suffer from these debilitating injuries.
So it's been somewhat of the holy grail in neuroscience and neurology to actually regain neurological function. When you've had your stroke or your spinal cord injury, mostly what the therapist would do is they'd basically help you to use what you have. You're weak on one side after a stroke. Let's teach you how to use an adaptive device. Let's teach you how to do things one-handed.
Which, by the way, which is what Burke excels at, because, I mean, if I were ever to have a debilitating injury and had to remain in a sort of a transition place after an operation or recovering in a hospital, Burke would be my choice because it's top of the line.
I'm fortunate to have incredible colleagues on the clinical side. Yes, it's a wonderful place for that. Also at Burke, though, is the Medical Research Institute, which I'm part of. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand how we get new nerve connections. My area of research is in recovery of movement. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to repair connections between the brain, which initiates movement, and the spinal cord, which executes movement. And what we've been trying to do is to strengthen those connections. So if you've had your stroke, or even most people with spinal cord injury, even if they're somebody like my brother who has no movement or sensation below the chest, usually they have some spared connections. We can see that with an MRI scan, for instance.
So it's not a complete severing. There's there
are a few cases.
The wire is frayed, sort of.
Exactly. But the signals going from the brain to the spinal cord are not strong enough to actually initiate movement. So we have adopted a strategy where we try to make those spare connections stronger. And the way we do it is with electrical stimulation. So not only is electricity the way that nerve cells normally communicate with one another, but electricity is also a potent trophic factor, a miracle grow, let's say, for the nervous system, where supplying activity in the form of electrical stimulation actually causes these nerve cells to sprout out and to form functional connections between the brain and the spinal cord. And in our laboratory studies, the electrical stimulation was enough to actually restore normal movement in the laboratory, in laboratory animals.
It has to be the precise frequency and amplitude. It's you can't just stick your finger in an electrical socket and hope for the best.
That's true. I think
you've been studying this for a long time.
We have, and not only does the dose and the frequency and everything have to be precise, but we need to target that electrical stimulation exactly to the parts of the brain that we're trying to repair the connections, and so what we see is that those connections and not others are the ones that sprout out. They form functional connections, and they help to restore movement. So we think that a similar strategy is very feasible in humans. We use implantable electrodes, which may be one strategy, but there's also ways to non-invasively stimulate the human brain. So this would be putting a powerful magnet over the scalp and delivering short bursts of electrical activity to stimulate the brain.
The so-called transcranial magnetic therapy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, there's also research, as I mentioned earlier, and I was being facetious, but stem cells are in the news, and actually there have been some instances where people go hither and thither and yon to offshore to get stem cells to regenerate their nerves after terrible accidents such as your brother's. What is the state of the art of that, and is there any promise in stem cells?
Well, stem cells are very primitive cells that have the advantage of being able to form all sorts of different types of cells. In the spinal cord or the brain, that's a very tough architecture to reform. In other words, to take one primitive cell, put it into an injured area, and say regrow this diverse collection of cells, which are the nerve cells as well as the supporting cells, the vasculature, all these very complex systems, and then reconnect in a functional way. It's a high order. We believe in that as a future therapy, but I think I would love that it would be available to people with stroke or spinal cord injury in the next few years. But my personal belief is that it's going to take much longer.
So more hype than ready for prime time. What about, there also is research on what are called neurotrophic growth factors, things that medicines and biological substances that can actually act as miracle grow for the nerves. Is this an area of research that you're pursuing?
Electrical stimulation actually helps to trigger those growth processes, and but people can put those growth factors in themselves. Actually, if stem cells are going to be applied in the near future, really they end up, what we think they will do in stroke or spinal injury is actually act as factories of these growth factors. So they're not actually going to replace the damaged brain or spinal cord, but they may actually help to coax these new connections, similar to what we're trying to do with electrical stimulation. We think that electrical, and we hope eventually that these therapies may be complementary to one another. The advantage of electrical stimulation, at least early on, is that one can apply it specifically to the connections that you want to target. Neurotrophic factors, whether directly or stem cells being those factories of neurotrophic factors, may cause sprouting sort of willy-nilly without any sort of direction to it. And so we think that targeting the therapy to the connections that you want to create is a very useful strategy.
And actually, you've chronicled some of this in a book. Can you tell us about that?
So an obstetrician named Adam Wolfberg had a daughter who was born very premature and then subsequently had a large bleed into her brain. And so Dr. Wolfberg wrote a book chronicling his daughter's struggles and wanted to include a portion about neuroplasticity. This is the process by which nerve cells gain new connections to one another. He found my work through a scientific meeting, and we became collaborators on this book and eventually close friends. I'm a child neurologist, and the kids who have brain injury at or around the time of birth really are terrific candidates for the kinds of therapies that we're helping to develop. They have an incredible plasticity within the developing nervous system and flexibility in using these spared connections to recover function. So
the key is to get them to the appropriate care as soon as possible.
Right. This is we're still in the experimental phase, but there's two types of therapies, one that's happening now and one that we hope to adopt in the near future. The first is just using intensive physical therapy, and this is more than just getting the child to use the affected hand, but we think that using a specific sequence of movements, either by holding down, by constraining the good arm and forcing use of the impaired arm, or by asking the child to do specific movements of the hands together, can help to recover function. And my colleagues have succeeded in doing this.
And this is applicable to so-called cerebral palsy.
Right.
I don't know if that's the correct term anymore. The PC term.
It is the correct term. So cerebral palsy is just abnormal, impaired movement due to injury to the developing brain. And the first category of cerebral palsy that we're investigating is so-called hemiplegic cerebral palsy, weakness on one side of the body. And so in those children with weakness on one side of the body, we've been able to develop intensive hand therapies to help them to recover function. And so that's a treatment that's going on right now. And my close colleagues at Columbia run intensive day camps to promote hand function. In the near future, we hope to supplement the intensive hand therapy with electrical stimulation, again using these non-invasive methods and applying electrical current across the brain in order to enhance the acquisition of new skills with training. In other words, the kid would be participating in this intensive camp experience, but also receive electrical stimulation before the training in order to help them recover even more function.
Oh, sounds very promising. How could someone reach you if they're interested in learning more about your research at Burke or other research being conducted at the Burke Institute?
So Burke is Burke, and the website is burke.org, and you'll see links to the Research Institute and then investigators in the Research Institute, and just click my laboratory, JCarmel, and we'd be more than happy to direct people to these resources.
Okay, well, congratulations on your great research, and I think it's going to really be the thing of the future for people who suffer from these types of deficits. It's a tough medical problem to tackle, but incrementally, through the efforts of folks like you, progress is being made, clearly.
And we hope that we're not the only ones working on this, either in our own institute or more broadly. And so we feel very strongly that those of us attacking the problem in various different directions, that we can come together and provide meaningful therapies for people.
Okay, once again, that's burke.org?
ORG, yes.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Dr. JCarmel. I'm Dr. Ronald Hoffman, and in just a moment, back to Health Talk, 1-800-544-7070 for your questions.